lovely and darling viewers, it's Jen here at Check Her Joy, and this time I'm reviewing Wires and Nerve, Volume 2, Gone Rogue. This is the second Lunar Chronicles graphic novel. It is written by Marissa Meyer, and it has art by Stephen Gilpin, and it is based off the art in Volume 1, which was done by Doug Holgate. Wires and Nerve Volume 1 and 2 make up the last of the Lunar Chronicles. There are 4 original novels with 2 companion novels that kind of happened first. So if you're really interested in following the whole story, go read Book 1, Cinder. And then there's also Scarlet, Cress, and Winter. Stars Above and Fairest are companion novels that you don't actually have to read to get like the gist of the whole storyline. But definitely start with Volume 1, Wires and Nerve, if you're going to read the graphic novels. It's my suggestion, because this starts right where that takes off. I mean, I guess you could do it, but it's a duology. Probably read both of them. So the Lunar Chronicles are dystopian fairy tale retellings. They take place in the future, and they are totally sci-fi. The main character of the original series is Cinder, and she is a cyborg, and she ultimately overthrows the evil queen of the moon and becomes the queen of Luna herself. She does this with the help of all her friends, who are also different fairy tale characters. So like Cinder is Cinderella, she has Scarlet, who is Little Red Riding Hood, Cress, who is a Rapunzel type character, and Winter, who is like Snow White, helping her out. Only completely different and changed and tweaked and set in the future, and it's awesome. Also playing a huge part of this is Cinder's best friend Aiko, who is an android. And the graphic novels follow Aiko as she tries to stop these wolf hybrids from destroying all of Earth and disrupting the tentative peace that Earth and the Moon currently have with Cinder ruling. So most of the first book was Aiko and Kinney going after Lysander Steele and his mutant wolf hybrids, who were the result of genetic experimentation and exploitation by the previous queen, Luna. The previous queen of Luna, Levana. Like I said, she's evil. But these guys are convinced that Cinder has a way to reverse their genetic engineering, and she just won't do it. Except Cinder doesn't have it. There's no way to reverse their engineering. She can't help them. She's trying to get them to just come back to Luna, and they will try to figure out places for them in society, and that's not good enough for these guys. They want to be fully human again. Also, since we're talking about Cinder, Cinder is preparing to step down and abdicate her throne. We found out in book 1 that this is something she's planning, and in book 2 she actually makes the big announcement and they start the elections rolling. And there is a ton of different reactions to this. Some people think it's awesome, totally cool, Luna's gonna have elections and be a democracy. Other people aren't so sure about it because the past rulers they've had of Luna have been vicious and evil, and they don't want any more of them. Like, Cinder is actually good, let's keep her. And then there are people who are like, why are you trying to abdicate? Like, why don't you want this position? What's your game? What are you doing? So tons and tons of reactions to Cinder giving up her throne. So in Volume 2, we also get to follow the wolf hybrids more, particularly Lysander Steele's plans to force Cinder to give them the corrective surgery that doesn't exist. The way they're planning on doing this is to go after what Cinder cares about most. And so they're going after her allies. They're going after Wolf and Aiko and trying to kidnap them. So in Volume 2, Wolf takes a bigger part of the story. He is a wolf hybrid himself, but he's one who is turned and is helping Cinder. Mostly because he's in love with Scarlet, who is totally one of Cinder's allies. Lysander Steele goes after Wolf in an attempt to get to Cinder. Like, he's gonna attack and steal Cinder's allies to force her hand and make her give them this antidote. And so he goes and tries to recruit Wolf. And so we get more of a look inside Wolf's brain and thought processes. Like, he loves Scarlet, but he's also still sees himself as a monster and doesn't see himself as being worthy of her. So part of the story is Wolf going with Lysander Steele and whether or not we trust Wolf, whether or not he's still a good guy and is working for Cinder, he's being the guy on the inside, or if he's actually turned and they're gonna have to take out their friends. So that's part of the suspense of this. And finally, we get to see the Peace Festival and the big ball that happens. Like in book 1, Cinder, there was one, and that was like Cinder's big moment, was attacking the queen and standing up to her in the middle of this ball. And it's been a year later now, And Cinder is going to go back to Earth, and she's going to go back to her boyfriend Kai, who is the Emperor of the Eastern Commonwealth, which is basically all of Asia. And so we get to this reunion scene, finally, where Kai and Cinder get to see each other again. And, of course, it's adorable. Like, I love Cinder and Kai. So to finally have them together in the same place and not be, like, calming each other while they're trying to rule two separate places, it's awesome, and I love it. So I super appreciated that. I also enjoyed the festival/ball and the storyline of that. So one of the concerns is that Lysander Steele is also going to attack the festival and the ball, and that they might not be safe, which is kind of ironic because it's this festival celebrating peace on Earth, and the humans not fighting with each other anymore. And here the wolves are going to come and attack everybody. So that was a cool storyline. I appreciated that. It was also kind of predictable. Like, of course, that was going to be happening, I think. So seeing the ball was also cool. Like, it's a fairy tale. I want the big ball scene where everybody's in their pretty dresses. And this being a graphic novel means that we do get to see them all in their pretty dresses. Like, there is Aiko in her awesome dress, and I appreciated that. I have a soft spot for that, guys. It's part of why I love fairy tales, is that romance. Speaking of romances, besides, well, Scarlet and Wolf's relationship becomes kind of on the rocks, as we're not sure whether or not Wolf can be trusted, so we're not sure whether or not he and Scarlet are going to end up together. There's also the adorable moment where Cinder and Kai reunite, and I loved it. And of course we have Jason and Winter and Cress and Thorn showing up. But most of this book, since it follows Aiko, is Aiko and Kinney's relationship, which I love. It's the slowly building friendship where they're starting to trust each other. Like, in book one, they absolutely didn't like each other, couldn't stand each other, didn't want to work together. And now they've kind of got this trust built where they respect each other for their fighting skills and their ability to get work done. And now they've moved on to kind of developing this more personal relationship. And I adore it. Super love Aiko and Kinney. So a big theme in this book is what it means to be human. And we see it in Aiko mainly, as she's struggling with her personality, because she is an android, but she has this faulty personality chip, which makes her think and act and behave like a human most of the time. And she has emotions, and she has feelings, and things that she's passionate about. And is that enough to make her human or not, is kind of a big theme of this, whether or not she can fall in love, or if somebody like Kinney could fall in love with her back. We also see Wolf and the other mutant hybrids, and whether or not they're still human. So they've had these mutations happen. They were human to begin with. Are they still human, or have they become something more animalistic? Are they something else now? And even to a slightly lesser degree, we have Cinder, who's a cyborg, where she is human, but she also has all these metal parts, and part of her brain is even rewired. And is that still human? And so a big part of the entire series, and especially this volume, is what does it mean to be human and what is humanity? So there are tons and tons of ethical, moral, intellectual concepts going on in this book, which is what I love about it. But at its heart, it's still also kind of a fairy tale, and it's got romance and adventure and fighting and intrigue, and I love this series. All of it. I really loved Volume 2. So this is totally a 5-star read. I think I have given all of the Lunar Chronicles 5 stars. Like, I super love this series so much. And there are a couple of things that I really, really want to talk about that are absolutely, completely spoilery. So if you haven't read Volume 2 yet and you want to go into it not knowing these things, feel free to come back once you've read it. So spoilers. So one of the things that I found really interesting about this book was Aiko personally. She finally sees the file that Lynn Guerin left on her that talks about his thought process and what he went through to create her personality. And we find out that she's actually programmed to be the way she is. Like, her personality was programmed. Her love of Prince Kai was programmed. And a lot of it comes down to this wish list that Peony had as a child. So this is what I want in a perfect, playmate. I want somebody who's obsessed with clothes and who is also obsessed with Prince Kai, but totally knows that Prince Kai is mine. And so all these things that we think of being quintessentially Aiko, they were actually programmed. And so there's this moral question about whether or not that's still Aiko. Like, is she her own person still, or is she just another android program, fulfilling her programming? Like, if you're programmed a personality, is that different than if you have a personality because it developed organically? There's also a question about whether or not humans who are predisposed to like something, if they like it, is that the same as being programming an android to like something? So there's lots of ethical questions about that. There is also a point in here where Aiko's body gets destroyed and they need to reboot her from a backup. And so there's a question about whether or not that's, I mean, it's still Aiko. Like, she still thinks she's Aiko. She still rationalizes herself as Aiko. But it's a little bit weird to think about her being able to be backed up and rebooted like that. Like, how many times can you back her up before she starts not being Aiko anymore? Like, is the backup Aiko the same as the Aiko beforehand? Theoretically, you could just create these backups and then restart them, and you'd have like multiple Aikos at once. Like, there's tons to think about that, and it's a little bit weird, and the story kind of just brushes over it because we need Aiko back. But there's still stuff in here I'm like, well, what does that mean? Also, this is an Aiko backed up from 10 days before, or a week before or something. So she and Kinney have had all of these relationship milestones happen, and things that happened, and fights that have happened, and Aiko doesn't remember any of them. Like, all of a sudden, Kinney is nice to her and interested in her and asking her out on a date, and she's really confused. And is it the same for Kinney? Like, if she's lost all this time that he had, like, they're not on the same page anymore. And so that one's also interesting to kind of think about their relationship. Aiko and Kinney's relationship on the whole, though, I super loved. I love them getting to know each other and slowly building this trust and slowly liking each other, and Kinney slowly starting to see Aiko as not just an android and as being her own personality, which is amazing. Kind of doesn't answer all my questions about Aiko and Kinney, though. Like, can we please have more? I need more. We have another short story where, like, Kai and Cinder get married, and then Aiko and Kinney show up and are totally dating, because I need that. I need that, please. Can we not be done with Lunar Chronicles? There's also lots of playing with the androids. So there's a scene in here where Cinder has to show up by herself with no help and basically put herself at Steele's mercy in order to save her friends that got kidnapped. And Cinder's like, I'm totally gonna do it. I'm gonna do it, guys. And I was like, Cinder, it's a really bad idea. You're like the leader of a country. You can't just leave. And so Aiko goes in her place. Aiko gets in an escort droid body that looks like Cinder and shows up, and it's adorable. Like, I just loved it. Like, I knew it was going to be Cinder. I'm like, that's what I would do. Like, I would have Aiko just be Cinder. Why not? So I loved that whole scene. And I love Aiko pretending to be Cinder. Like, that worked wonderfully. I thought it was great. It's also heartbreaking when the body gets destroyed and we have Kinney mourning Aiko dying, which is sad, bittersweet. But I appreciated it. There's a scene in here where Winter is giving an interview, and the interviewer is trying to like push her own agenda, and Winter's not having it, and she's like sidestepping these things. Like, the interviewer asks her about the scar on her face and if Levana gave it to her, and Winter's like, oh, do you mean this scar right here where I got this implant? Why? It's awesome. Yes, you should all get these implants. Like, Winter, you're amazing. We see Sir Clay, Jason's dad, stepping up and becoming like a much bigger advisor, and eventually running in the elections to take over the country, which I really loved. Like, I would vote for him. There's also a group hug scene where they just like pull Kinney into it. Like, everybody else is all for the group hug. Yay, we defeated the bad guys. And Kinney's off standing by themselves, and then we have Aiko just like yanking him in, like, you are a part of this group. Hug us. It's great. I love this series. It's so adorable. The art is by a different artist, so some of these scenes look a little bit different, and you can tell that the expressions have changed a little bit, so there's a slight difference in the art. But I thought it was awesome. I actually like the expressions more, and I don't know if it's just because this is a brand new one that it felt refreshing, but I liked it. Although I'm still not sold on the whole muted blue tone of this art style. So I really loved Wires and Nerve, Volume 2, Gone Rogue. I've actually really loved all of the Lunar Chronicles. I'm pretty sure I give them all 5 stars. So yes, I recommend this if you haven't read it yet but got to the end of my video. It's amazing. Let me know in the comments below if you have read this or if you're planning on reading it and what you think of these guys. Do you also ship Aiko and Kinney because they're amazing? Or do you think it's a little bit weird that the human and the android are slowly starting to like each other? I'm totally for it though. So feel free to like, share, and subscribe, and peace out. I love you guys, and keep reading. Bye!